So welcome to the next of our feature of Aging with Attitude. My name is Rita, and this series is applicable to basically all ages, but particularly between the ages of 45 and 64. It is about starting a new conversation in much more than body, mind, and spirit. There are actually several components for healthy, active aging, which include physical, emotional, vocational, environmental, spiritual, just to name a few. And these particular holistic components have been taken from national, international, provincial, and our very own regional Aging with Attitude initiative that we did within the last couple of years. Today, our guests, I've got two of our guests here, and it's Charles Scott and Les Waldie. And I'd like to start out with Charles, asking you, when I first asked you about joining us on this show, you said you weren't old enough and that you were going to be just like Les. Can you expand a little bit on that?
Just like Les. Okay, well, first of all, I'm 53, at least physically. The chassis is 53, the driver's 8. The Les Waldie retirement program, as far as I'm concerned, is moved from getting paid to work 60 hours a week to volunteer for 50 hours a week, so I thought that was a pretty decent plan. But primarily, I have the real benefit of doing things that I think are significant. I'm an immigrant. I come from a society that blew up. We didn't leave Jamaica, we fled it, which is where I was born. And so, having seen that failure is an option, I had an opportunity to work towards success, and success at a societal level. So I've spent 28 years, oh my goodness, 28 years in economic development, trying to create and help access to opportunity for the residents within a community. And I teach up at UNBC, and I don't anticipate retiring at any point. I know people my age in their mid-50s who can tell you to the day when they retire, and it's a decade from now. To me, that's existence. There's an opportunity to live, and that requires a decision you're going to do that, and asking yourself some difficult questions like what matters to me, and then when you get those answers, act on them. And maybe there's an income stream, and then maybe there isn't, but there's a whole lot more than simply taking up space and paying your bills.
Some great words of advice. Mm-hmm. So, Les, you were about 20 years earlier or thereabouts from what I understand, and maybe you can let us know what you were feeling back then and just how that played out for you.
I'd be happy to. Well, my wife and I moved here in 1974, and I took on a role at that time in the forest industry and human resources. And prior to that, in the previous 6 years, we'd moved 6 times, and we decided this was a place that we had to spend a little time. We weren't going to move. It was quite clear to me that we weren't going to be moving again for a while. So I stayed with the forest industry and got involved in the community. And I enjoyed the work that I was doing there. But it got to the point where I felt that I had accomplished what I could accomplish meaningfully in the role I had. So I decided when I turned 60 that maybe it was time to think about doing something else. Now, and I never had a worry about what I was going to do. It was what choices am I going to make about the things I'm going to do, because I'd been pretty involved in the community pretty well since we got here. So I did set up a little consulting business. I did get engaged with Northern Health on an ongoing basis for 3 or 4 years in an HR capacity as well. But at the same time, I was involved in the community in a number of ways. And so I had lots of things I have more things to do than I was able to prioritize the available time to accomplish them all. Mm-hmm. So it was a nice transition. And I still am engaged in the community. I'm now a lot older than 60. I was just turned 75. But I've been active in a number of things, although and Carol and I have really enjoyed the transition.
So you're one of those people that have actually walked the walk here in the community.
Well, yeah, I've certainly been involved in a lot of things. I mean, and we were fortunate. It was an important piece for us was to, as we got to about Charles' age, we said, we got to start thinking about making sure we've got the financial wherewithal to be able to have some options. And so that was an important piece for us, and that's an important piece, I think, for anybody that's getting into that, into the age range that you're talking about, is to look at the financial circumstances and be sure that you're doing some good planning. We were fortunate for a variety of reasons, but that has not been a big issue for us. I mean, nobody's got a bottomless pit of money, but we can certainly do a lot of the things that we'd like to do. So that was an important piece to us.
So a question to both of you. Do you think there's enough education out there right now for the 45 to 64-year-old demographic in the things that we need to be looking for in order to plan that second half of life?
I don't know of a lot of formal education that's there, or formal. I mean, there's a lot of pragmatic advice that's around. If you want to talk to people that have retired and I've talked to people that have retired and have found it not the wisest decision that they could have made, because they hadn't planned ahead. They didn't have things in their life that was much beyond their job and their immediate family, who by the time they retired had gone. So they found a vacuum there, and some of them were struggling with trying to fill that. So I think it's important to live a whole life, and you know, there's a lot of pieces to life besides work, and that's what I'm doing, and I certainly see Charles doing that too.
Your comments, Charles?
There's one of the things that I do is I teach at the university. I'm a faculty member there. So you'll understand when I say formal education is not all the answer. Not everything you need to know does a university teach. In fact, the argument would be that occasionally we throw in a few things, the usefulness of which is questionable. But there's no lack of information. My wife had known for a number of years what she was called by God to do. And we thought that meant go to university, get a seminary degree, go be a clergy person, etc. And the reality was that the formal path was not the path to equip her for the specific thing she was called to be, which was to walk with those who were coming to the end of the life, or those who were struggling to say goodbye, or those kinds of things. So there were specific workshops, seminars, books that she could take that weren't formal courses that resulted in letters after your name, but that were more than effective at equipping her for the challenges. And Les's observation about perhaps having a more wholly well-defined life, I certainly am aware of how easy it is to allow the things that you get paid to do to crowd out some other things that may not come with their own income stream. And between raising our children and doing things that earned an income, there were some deficiencies. And so I started intentionally connecting, and deliberately addressing the places that had become less developed over time simply because of neglect. And that was a choice. But again, it's all a choice. Mm-hmm. I have exactly as many hours in my day as Julius Caesar had in his, or Mother Teresa had in hers. What do I do with it? Well, that sometimes involves letting go of some things in order to create the time and energy to engage with others. And I think the question becomes asking yourself, what matters to you? Les and I both have been primarily engaged in business pursuits, and I tend to work a lot with business owners. And my suggestion to them is, you're just starting out this business, there's a whole bunch of things you don't know that you don't know. Go find somebody who's perhaps no longer actively running their own business and ask them if they'd be willing to meet with you for coffee once a month, just to chat about the realities of building your own business. And there's no shortage of people who are very interested in contributing in that way. They have the experience, they'd be delighted to pass it on. All they were looking for was somebody to ask and a way to stay engaged. Mm-hmm. Those people are there. That's a form of engagement. But yeah. If you're thinking, gosh, I don't need more of where I'm already at, okay, well then what do you need, and what are you going to give up to make it happen?
So you think finding your purpose is pretty important?
Well, the alternative is existence, in my view. Significance apparently is optional, but it really shouldn't be. And nothing that I've found is going to come close to rivaling something that I find significant.
That's-
What people see as significant, of course, varies substantially from person to person.
Yep.
Some people think that being, something significant is that you're going to be in a strong leadership position, you're going to be profiled in the community, or doing those kinds of things. That certainly is one piece of staying engaged. But there's lots of things that people do and can get involved in that are active, that are stimulating, all sorts of crafts. I mean, I've seen retirees that have built fabulous workshops and build furniture and sell it quietly. It's a totally different thing than they were doing, but it creates for them a purpose in life that fills their needs. And so it's as Charles says, it's about being aware of how do you want to spend the available time we have. Life is a series of choices, and if you don't choose to do something, then you're going to choose to do nothing, and that's not what I think that most people want to be doing things.
Exactly.
Let me give you an example. The church that I attend sponsored a refugee family. A number of us were at the point where we could put on the table the resources necessary to bring them over, but there were other people who had time. And so they took them grocery shopping, and they helped them, and they were there and listened and talked to them as they sorted out this new life in a new country. They needed more than simply stuff. They needed
Right.
people to talk to. And so people who could write a check wrote a check, and people who had the time to spend and listen and advise and assist with a ride or what have you, contributed in that way, and both mattered. Both were essential.
Yeah. Another thing that I'd just like to address here too is a few years back I did a little bit of research on what was called the Seniors Games, and did a little bit of research, and they were in the process of rebranding to the 55 plus. Now, Les, I know that you had something to do with these games.
Yes, I did.
And I was also told at the time that just being athletically involved is much more stimulating than just for the body. It's the mind, all kinds of things. So what caused you to get involved with that?
Well, actually, the mayor called me and said, "Would you like to get involved in this? I would like somebody to take it on." And it was the first thing I'd done. And I'd be the first to say that I am not. One of my strengths has not necessarily been athletic prowess, but certainly I had the organizational ability and so on, and the interest to pull it together. It was an amazing experience to see these folks, and we did get the opportunity to visit. We brought the games here, but we also had an opportunity to visit the previous year's games, and to see people, leaping into the swimming pool that were 86 and 88 and 89. As well as 55 and 56, was really a delight to see, and to talk to them and how engaged they were. There's just a whole opportunity there. I think that the rebranding of the games is helping, because a lot of us don't think of ourselves as seniors. We were over age 55, and I think that was a smart move. But it was a great engagement for our community, and we got a lot of people that were age 55 and up that weren't athletes, but were delighted to be involved in a whole range of volunteer activities to help put those games on. And it was a great success and a great experience.
From my understanding, it's not only the physical athleticness, but also there's a portion for horses, a portion for bicycles, even playing cards, isn't there?
Yes, there is. There was whist tournaments and all sorts of things. So when the folks don't have the athletic ability or the capability anymore, there are things to do in that games, which I understand is still happening every year in the province somewhere. So I think it's a great thing that the province continues to support and sponsor, and communities pick up and work at.
So a question for either or. What part do you think the whole physical aspect has to do with the moving us forward?
Well, I'm not the only person inside in whom there's a 19-year-old going, what happened? So there's a number of attributes that a healthy regime and exercise regime covers. And certainly I can tell when I'm not regularly going to the gym that productivity goes down, but also interest goes down. There's certainly advantages to maintaining a measure of physical exercise, and obviously I'm looking to increase that component within my life because this is not the body that you get when you have rigid self-discipline and a regular exercise regime. But the energy with which to do the things in front of you comes because you've looked after the chassis.
That's right.
Go
That's
ahead,
right.
Russ.
Yep, and I just echo that. I have a I don't go to a gym, but I have a treadmill in the basement, and I'm on it 5 days a week for half an hour. I used to jog. That was about the limit of my physical abilities, was to go running, and I did that till my doctor said that it was not helping my back at all. But I do that and some exercises 5 days a week, and when I don't do it for 2 or 3 days, I notice it right away.
Yeah.
It's really important to keep, and it's certainly made me feel good about myself.
Mm-hmm. And my next question too, for the either or, what part do you think social engagement plays in just keeping involved with people around you? Go ahead. You can go first, Lest, if you like.
All right. I mean, social engagement's important. I mean, everybody has a different level of need for that. And Carol and I have we have a great relationship. We have a close family, and I think that it's important to stay in touch with people. We have some good friends, and you just don't ignore them. That's all. But we're not driven by social engagement. We're driven by other things. But absolutely, staying involved socially is important. I mean, again, when I've talked to people that haven't been engaged in things, they get very insular. And because I'm more active in the community, and I think Charles would say the same thing, we do have a lot of social engagement by virtue of the things that we do. Which is stimulating and supportive. We need to have that.
Yeah. What's your thoughts, Charles?
Professionally, I'm active in economic development, and that requires a certain amount of, it has the opportunity for a certain amount of input into policy. And the problem is you get the real risk of echo chambers, where everybody thinks the same. And they charge off and have ideas that make sense to them without really understanding that there are plenty of folks for whom that isn't necessarily helping. And so social engagement for me is both fun, because really, do I want to write reports all day? Do I want to engage online? Does that need to dominate my interaction with people? Hopefully not. That's less compelling. But also, just because it makes sense to me doesn't mean it's right. Just because it makes sense to me doesn't mean it's actually helping people. And if you have an opportunity to have some measure of impact on the kind of programming that's happening, or the ways in which resources of society are being spent, I think you have an obligation to at least inform yourself to make sure that it's not just meeting people like you. And that involves reaching out to other folk, and not just folk in the same general shared interest. Plus, it's fun.
Fun is such an important
Right.
issue. And what part of what you did, Les, was fun? Was
Well-
any of it fun?
Well, most of it was fun. I mean, because particularly since I stopped full-time employment, I work hard not to only do things that I'm enjoying, to do things that are fun. And again, what's fun for me isn't necessarily fun for Charles, or for you, or for somebody else. We have to understand what turns us on and what we'd like to do, and make those choices. Life's a series of choices. What are the things I'm going to do that I want to do? And we have a recreational place in Ness Lake. We enjoy that a lot. We have a lot of fun out there with family and friends, and so there's a lot of things that you can do. But again, each individual needs to say, what's going to turn me on? And you got to consciously think about that, as Charles said.
There's you are going to do some things that are not fun. If I'm going to get paid, I'm going to tell the customer what
Oh, yeah.
happened, and I'm going to write reports, and reports are not fun. Let's just. But the question becomes: is there a bigger narrative that this is engaging in, and is there an opportunity to do something that matters to you? And if it's moving the puck down ice in the rink that I really want to be skating in, that's pretty straightforwardly going to involve a measure of fun. I enjoy doing things that matter, and I try to make sure that as much of that also happens to be satisfying as well as significant, which means playing to my strengths and doing what I can to make sure that the areas that I'm not naturally strong in, maybe even naturally weak in, are handled ideally by somebody else.
Well, and just let me clarify, because I certainly agree with Charles that when you're employed, there is a whole bunch of things that you do that maybe aren't particularly quote fun, but when you're moving towards where I'm at, you can hopefully, and I've certainly tried to avoid as many of the things that aren't fun and focus on the things that are fun.
Every now and then somebody gets fairly directive, and I get to say, community volunteer.
That's right.
I am a community volunteer.
Yeah.
Well, I need this and this and this. I'm sure you do. Good luck with that.
So we're sort of in our last 5-10 minutes of this program. And Charles, I have a different question for you than of Les. In 20 years' time, what do you think the idea of retirement is going to look like?
Well, I think 20 years from now, the current trends towards robotics and artificial intelligence will have so redefined work that I'm not sure that we're going to remember this point in time as being a reasonable guide to where we are in 20 years. I think there's going to be a major reshaping, and I guess my question is going to be, to what degree can you intentionally connect and stay active? Because there may, in fact, I would expect there probably will be fewer opportunities for employment, more opportunities in a self-employment space, and what do you do when a lot of people have a lot of time on their hands? And if you spent any time with young people, you know that there's this online world that can simply suck them away, and they just charge off and do a whole bunch of time online. Pretty sure that isn't the answer. Really sure that isn't the answer.
So my question to Les, what advice would you give your 45-year-old self?
My 45-year-old self, stay tuned to everything that's going on around you. Be aware of what's going on. Keep focused on what you understand is happening. You know, in today's world today, we know that transportation models are going to change. We know that there's a huge environmental issue that is facing our planet. Stay engaged with that. Watch it. Make sure you're a responsible citizen, because the world is continuing to change, and it is changing at a faster pace than when I came through it, and it's going to continue to change. So the key is, I think, to stay engaged and not fight everything, but understand what's happening and adapt to it, and say, how can I use it? How can I capitalize on it? How can I influence it?
There's an ancient Chinese proverb that says, "That which cannot be resisted, embrace." And there's a lot of wisdom to that.
Perfect wisdom. So with that, and before we wrap it up, I would just like to say thanks to my guests, Charles Scott, Les Waldie. And so just in a nutshell, keep in mind that, it's about balance. And others of this series of Aging with Attitude, you will see all types of different perspectives. So until next time, my name is Rita Weave, and thank you for joining us.